And we're back now with the Lakers Fast Break. I always like a good intro, so I have to pick and choose which one I like. So I picked that one for you guys. It is NBA Observations, Lakers Fast Break. It is Gerald Glassford. Coming right back at you here from Lakers Fast Break, Pop Culture Cosmos, where we cover the latest news and trends in pop culture each and every week, twice a week, wherever you get your podcasts. Josh and I covered what went on during the Memorial Day weekend box office. Plus, we cover a lot of things that are going on in the world of video games, TV, movies, pop culture, and more right there for you at the Pop Culture Cosmos. Plus, John Orlando and he is from the PVD cast. He and I did our State of Pro Wrestling. So if you're into pro wrestling, check it out this weekend, wherever you get your podcasts, or right now on Pop Culture Cosmos on YouTube. Plus also as well, of course, Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Of course, Joe Soro. He was here last night. He may be here tonight. You never know what he's going to do because he's the man behind SimBlades, SimBladesWithAY.com, and of course, all that he does for Lakers Ball as Ox1947. Right there for you at LakersBall.com. Our good friends, Laker Tom and Jamie Sweet, you know they're always arguing somewhere, and that somewhere always is at, of course, Lakerholics.com. Our good friend John Costa, hopefully he'll stop by. I sent him a message to go ahead and come on over here. You can find him as John Costa on Lakers Corner Clutch Talk. Our good friend Stone Hansen, he is knee-deep in the NBA draft prospects. He's out there giving you the prospects you need to know about. So go ahead and find out what he's talking about today when the NBA draft at report_court on Twitter. Plus our good friends, of course, Daniel Berry Sports Highlights. Also as well, of course, Lakers in 5, Empire Jeff TV, John McCallion channel. Give him always a big shout out. And of course, everybody else that helps us out. Please do so by helping them out by doing the same thing you should do for us. Liking, sharing, subscribing, following. You can do it. I know you can. Please go ahead and do so to get the latest notifications on when we go live on the air today or in coming days, because Joe and Sean and Jamie you'll see more of them, a little less than me because, you know, I'm going to be taking a couple days off here and there. Or will I be stuck doing it on my days off? We'll find out right here at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast. I have a feeling I'll be stuck doing it more than I care to admit here in the coming days. So I don't know if I'll really have some time off here at the Lakers Fast Break. But it is, of course, NBA Observations. We just finished Game 4 of the Western Conference Finals between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks, with Frank's team unfortunately not getting the job done just yet. Minnesota pulling out, eking out the 105-100 victory. Finally, the best shooting big man of all time, as he is self-proclaimed himself, showed up for a game in the Western Conference Finals, and that was Karl Anthony Towns. 9 of 13, 4 of 5 for 3, 25 points. Anthony Edwards had 29 points himself. Not great shooting, but still 9 assists, 10 rebounds. That got it done over a subpar performance from Luka Doncic, in my opinion. 28 points, though. And Kyrie Irving, 6 of 18. Yeah, it's not the Kyrie Irving you want, but they still have a 3-1 lead as they head back to Minnesota. And here today to discuss that, plus who are the best free agents available this summer, or who can make themselves available this summer, is a good man indeed. You got to go ahead and check him out at OrlandoMagicDaily.com, one of the many, many places that you can find his work at. It is Alfred Ezman. Alfred, always great to have you here. I know you and I have gone back and forth on finding a good day and time. I know it's late for you, so I'm always happy when you can stop by here at the Lakers Fast Break.
Yeah, Gerald, thank you for having me back. It's been too long. I quite frankly was like, today's the day. I got to get back on. I'm trying to think how long it's been. The first round of the playoffs, I think.
Yes, about 3 weeks.
Yeah, about that. And, here we are. The NBA season's coming to a close. We have, of course, the NBA Finals coming up very shortly once the Dallas Mavericks get this done. But excited to be back on talking some basketball. We have a lot of free agent stuff. There's a lot of intriguing names out there in the the pool to pick from for everybody. So
absolutely. Next year is actually supposed to be an even better free agent pool, but the ones
yeah,
can actually get themselves off restricted status or give up their final year. Interesting nonetheless, my friend.
yes, very much so. You know, a lot of big names out there, a lot of teams who, you know, need some help are at the top of the salary cap rankings, so to speak. So, you know, we'll have to wait and see, but I'm very excited for it. And there's a lot of rumors I've been hearing and can't wait to get started and talk about it.
Absolutely. We'll be able to talk about that here coming up here in just a few minutes. But first, it is game 4. Want to go ahead and touch on that. My friend, it was Minnesota eking it out. And just like Indiana, they've had their issues in regards to keeping that lead late in the game. Between Indiana and Minnesota, what, 6 close games?
I would think, yeah.
6
Something
close
like
games, 5 blown leads. No, actually, no, 6 blown leads. 6 blown leads, 6 close games until today. This was number 7. And finally, Minnesota or Indiana, in this case, Minnesota, they got the job done. What was the difference to you at this point? I said the easy, low-hanging fruit this time around was Karl-Anthony Towns. I think he's the major reason why they were down 0-3 because of his terrible shooting overall in the series. He came back strong today, but did you see something else that might have caused Minnesota to pull it out?
Yeah, you mentioned it very quickly, but I'd like to touch on it a little bit more. It was Luka Doncic's night. I think Minnesota took advantage of not necessarily. I mean, 28 points on paper for anybody in the league is a good night, but you know we know what Luka's about at this point and what he can do, and he's gonna. I think eventually, and I think everyone thinks eventually he's gonna continue to do that in the finals. But tonight was just not the most efficient night. Actually, not really at all. He got to the line a good bit, went 10 for 12, which is good. But outside of that, 7 for 21 from the field, 4 for 11 from 3. You know, Dallas sometimes can get away with that. I have faith that, you know, maybe during another game, it was a 5-point game. So in the end, Dallas could have gotten away with it maybe on another night. But Minnesota did a good job of, you know, I think taking advantage of kind of a very off shooting night for Luka. And that's what they
Kyrie
needed.
as well.
Yeah, him too. Kyrie, let me see what he was.
6
Kyrie
of
went
18.
and 1 of 6 from 3, and he did not get to the free throw line that much. So, yeah, they took advantage of the most, or of I think at this point the most dynamic duo in the NBA. Now that the Nuggets duos are gone, and of them having a bad night, and you know they got a good win in Dallas when they needed to. Now they're heading back to Minnesota. I don't think they'll come back, but you got to think about it at this point. Heading back to Minnesota for Game 5, it's like, well, you never know. Maybe they could turn this into a 3-2 series and all of a sudden momentum swings, but we'll have to wait and see. I think that's the big key though, was that they were able to, one, I think out rebounding the Mavericks just alone was a good enough job for them. They need to do that the entire series with the bigs they have. And then also the off night Luka and Kyrie had really helped them, I think, get the win tonight and scrape one out in Dallas.
So you think if they go back to, when they go back to Minnesota, not if, when they go back to Minnesota, you think Dallas is going to finish it out then?
I think so. Either that or when Dallas comes back Game 6, I don't really see. I saw Daniel commented Wolves in 7, although that would be awesome and very, very cool. But
that'd be a first.
It would be a first. I do think. I just think, you know, either Minnesota gets the win in Minnesota, then loses in Dallas, or Dallas just flat out wins Game 5. One of the two. I just think they can't hold this out. Look. You know, Minnesota has their advantages. I mentioned the rebounding with Derek Lively out, who was out tonight. Obviously, the boards were going to go Minnesota's way. I think that was a foregone conclusion pretty much. But overall, I think Dallas had just been playing too well. That duo we talk about, Kyrie, Luka's playing too hot, and eventually they're going to pull this one out in the next 2 games.
Once again, it is Alfred Ezman. Please go ahead and support everything that he does out there. But first, start off with his great articles that you can find at the OrlandoMagicDaily.com website, part of the fan-sided experience. And my friend, so with that said, you've got Boston relaxing right now, waiting to the 6th. That's the only saving grace. If Dallas finishes off sooner rather than later, there'll still be several days before they will actually have to go ahead and meet Boston in the NBA Finals. So with Luka's trick knee leaving him questionable every game, I don't know. What does that say? I mean, you would think they want to go ahead and do what they can to finish it off sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And I think you want to keep Boston on their toes in general, you just want to keep them on your toes. So you want to get this done as quick as you can. And I think at the same time, though, Dallas needs to be careful. Like I was talking about, Minnesota can easily get the win in Minnesota next game if they try. They can't look ahead too much into the Boston series, even though they should prepare a little bit because it does seem like a conclusion at this point. I do think they need to focus on the series right now and ahead. But as of right now, I'm looking, ESPN has game 1 of the finals June 6th. That's still a pretty good distance away and a lot of rest for Boston until then, since it's May 28th, at this point. I think and Boston did their job. I mean, they really, the sweep of Indiana is what I think that both Western Conference teams did not want heading into face them, because I think Boston's the favorite at this point. I saw futures bets for the NBA Finals. Boston was minus 230 to win it all. So I think that's pretty lopsided. And I think a sweep is not what they wanted. So Dallas, in this case, is going to want to get this over with as quickly as possible and get this win in Minnesota. And I think they are very much capable of doing that.
Yeah, they're going to have to be, because again, any more rest that they can give Luka with his trick knee, also as well, Maxi Kleber, who is just coming back from the shoulder injury, and also somebody that's a really big key for them that was out of today's game in Derek Lively II.
Yeah.
With the neck sprain. Anybody, any more time that they can give these guys to go ahead and get some rest, I'm sure will be greatly appreciated.
Yes, because I mentioned the rebound thing again. I'm big on rebounds tonight, but I'm going to continue rolling with it. Heading into Boston, I think you can't go without your big boards guys and expect to beat them at all. I mean, you can't beat the best team in the NBA.
Oh, you need 12 fouls against, well, actually with Maxi Kleber, 18 fouls against Porzingis.
Yes. And yeah, both of those guys. And I mean, you need to be completely healthy on your A game. So again, Dallas just needs to recuperate as much as possible. But again, at the same time, kind of speed this thing up and get to Boston for the NBA Finals.
Once again, it is Alfred Ezman. Please go ahead and support him today at OrlandoMagicDaily.com and everything that he's doing as part of the fan-sided experience that out there. Again, he's college-bound, going to ASU Sun Devil. There you go. Congratulations again on that. I know I've told you that before, but publicly I wanted to go ahead again. Just so happy for you, my friend, that it was my letter of recommendation that was the
the deciding factor.
Yes, the deciding factor. It was the tables turned once I sent that over. I just want to let you know.
No, and thank you so much once again for doing it. Much appreciated. And again, super excited to be over there on that side of the country with you for a year, which is going to be cool.
Worries. Always, my friend. And like I say, you ever buy Vegas, hit me up, man. There you go. Of course, it is the NBA still moving on. I do want to go ahead before we get into the NBA free agents. I want to tell you something, because on this show, Joe, myself, Sean, we go out of our way, as you've heard many times in our audience, rip the organization known as the Los Angeles Lakers, which we love so dearly, but we'll rip the hell out of it. Let's just put it that way. One of the individuals that we're merciless on is Rob Pelinka. He has had a reputation of hiding when things aren't good and being out there when things are bad. He hides. When things are good,
right,
he's out there right in front.
Yeah.
Well, today was interesting because I don't know if you caught wind of this at Oklahoma City, but Sam Presti, who we on the show, especially myself, have said he's done a very good job with the Oklahoma City Thunder. He's got them set up. There is absolutely no excuse why they shouldn't be a elite level team or near or at the top of the Western Conference for the rest of this decade with all the different assets, both young and draft assets they have going forward. Well, even Sam Presti can go out in front of a worldwide audience like he did today and admit mistakes, because he admitted today that the Gordon Hayward trade, the trade that they move at the deadline. Now, it didn't cost them. I mean, if you're a big Trey Mann fan, okay, I get that, but traded a couple players, traded the contract to Bertans and a couple second rounders. Not life threatening if you have like umpteen thousand picks like the Oklahoma City Thunder, but he went out there today. And what was interesting, he didn't have to, but he went out there and said this one was on him, that he made a mistake in making that trade. It obviously didn't work out. Gordon Hayward did absolutely next to nothing for them in their rotation. He did next to nothing production wise. So I get that. I understand that. But what does it say when a GM in a rare time goes out there and actually says, you know what, this one is on me?
Well, I'll speak, I'll talk about how I feel about Sam Presti. He's one of the best in the game at this. Love or hate how he goes about getting picks and whatnot. I know some people online and from what I see on social media hate the way he does it. He does it and he does it well. And I mean, look at his team. It's one of the younger, brightest futures in the NBA, and what they have right now on the table, regardless of what Gordon Hayward did for them. So Sam Presti is one of the best in the game about it, and one of the best in the game. And what he did with that is I think he just showed to Thunder fans and to the rest of the league, how much he cares about the team and how much he cares for his own job and how good of a job he does. And I think that's part of the deal, is owning up to it. And I think that's very bold. I can't, Gerald, Gerald, I don't know about you. I really can't name a lot of times GMs have gone out and done that in any sport, really. I mean, I think that's a unique story. And I think that was the right thing to do. I think if you're a Thunder fan and you see that, I think you're like, okay, we're in good hands for the next 10 to 15 years with this guy, because he's building something special. He's admitting when he does something wrong, which in my opinion, he doesn't do very often to begin with. And I think it's the perfect scenario. The Thunder have their guy, in short, for my reaction to what that was.
So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to go too much into it, but I just want to say that, it's rare that a GM will be upfront in the moment.
Yeah.
They'll say it's, oh yeah, 10 years down later. Oh yeah, I made a mistake 10 years ago. Yeah. Or 5 years ago, whatever. But rarely in the moment do they tell you, you know what, I blew it. And to me, it was kind of refreshing. When I heard it, I had to do a double take to realize that an NBA GM actually admitted to a recent mistake. Because I'll never hear that from Rob Pelinka, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, you know what? The thing is, though, it's not like he made a mistake and he's like just got rid of all their assets, Alfred.
Mm-mm. No.
When you have that many assets, you can make a lot of mistakes, right?
Right. No, he has like a Santa Claus bag full of draft picks and all this stuff and all these young players, and he really could do this again, 5 more times if he wanted to, and the Thunder still wouldn't be that much affected by what they have. So he's sitting pretty. And again, yeah, I mean, this wasn't, and he's apologizing for a trade, Gerald. In retrospect, looking at who the trade involved, it's role players. You know what I mean? It's minimal role players.
Did fans really get upset about that after the season?
No, I don't. I mean, look, the Thunder had an exceptional year, right? Yeah, the Thunder had an exceptional year. I mean, they're very happy with where they're at, and there's teams that team is going to be set for a long time. Even after that trade, they sat in the top 3 in the West the remainder of the season. So I think it's very noble, very humbling to see Sam Presti do that. But at the same time, if you're an NBA fan in general, including the Thunder fans, you're kind of just like laughing and like, that's so sweet. But you didn't really have to do that. You know what you have, and that you're still pretty safe with what you have.
But I'll tell you what, my friend, it is interesting how that will lay itself out with OKC, because they still got cap space. They still have draft picks, a ton of draft picks, and they still have young assets. So it's interesting how they will upgrade their team over the course of this summer. So we'll see how that plays out. But of course, how you can go ahead and lay out the groundwork for your team to get better during the offseason are free agents. And there are, yes, going to be some free agents that are going to be available during this offseason, some of which are very familiar to Lakers fans out there, which is part of the reason why I've brought you on today, my friend. But
Right.
we'll start off with who is possibly the biggest free agent on the market from what you're seeing, because restricted, or they can go ahead and just waive their option for their final year, or they're just an unrestricted. We're just going to base it out on all those factors.
Right.
Who is the most intriguing free agent to you this summer?
Oh, that's hard. I think one name, I guess I'll start with one name that really intrigues me, and a location that really intrigues me with him is Trae Young. Just off the top of my head, a team that sits with a lot of cap space right now is the San Antonio Spurs. I believe. Let me see.
I'll take a look at his contract. I didn't think he was. I thought he had more years on his contract.
This would be. It would be a. It would be a trade. Let me see.
Yeah, he would be a trade. So,
I'm sorry. So I'll go with my second option. Oof on my part. I'm sorry.
Yes.
My second option for that is Paul George. I do think Paul George.
He is a free agent.
Yes. There we go. Sorry to anyone watching. Yes. Not a good moment. Not a good moment for me.
No,
but
all good.
Okay, I'm gonna go with Paul George here. I think he's not going to be able. He's not the Paul George of old. Everyone once knew. I think that's obvious at this point. But he's still very productive with what he can do. A lot of these teams at the top that are like one piece away. My Orlando Magic come to mind with that. Other teams as well. Oklahoma City, if they could find a way to rotate him in. Philadelphia is another really big time option with the cap space they have. I think just the options available for him and how he would fit into some of these teams with a lot of cap makes him really, really intriguing, and makes him very, very, just very, very good for where he can go. I think if Philadelphia does that, Philadelphia puts themselves in a position to, make themselves a title contender again. Orlando takes the next step maybe and goes even further in the playoffs. The other team I mentioned with him, even a team like Utah makes themselves competitive for at least the postseason again, because Utah is sitting there with a lot of cap space as well. So I don't know. There's a lot of teams who are, either like one piece away from certain spots they want to be in with how their franchise is currently. And Paul George, I think, is the perfect kind of missing piece to that. Not Trae Young. He's not a free agent. Alfred's wrong. Don't listen to me about that one. Paul George is the missing piece that these teams need.
Absolutely. But Pale Fox, apologies on Trae Young. Now, he still may be traded as far as a trade target this summer. Right. He may be one of the top individual players that can be traded.
Yes.
And may be traded, especially if Atlanta really wants to break up that backcourt, which there are rumblings that may happen. That's right. That's a different story. And that's something that obviously the Lakers, San Antonio, Orlando, they'll all be interested in hearing more about, as far as possibly Trae Young possibly heading on the way to there, or DeJounte Murray, whichever one they decide to go ahead and send away. But that's something Trae Young, as far as, going to be very interesting indeed. But Paul George, if he walks away from the final $48 million on his contract, which is heavily rumored that he does, because at 33, he's probably looking for one last big payday. And if that's the case, he could sign a 3 or a 4-year deal that could still pay him about $200 million, Alfred.
Yeah,
I think that's probably what he'd be leaning himself into. Would Orlando go out of its way to sign that kind of deal for Paul George?
Yes, because I think they could, because they have role player pieces that I think they're going to let go of. Markelle Fultz is one of those, although this isn't like a big amount of money, but just relatively speaking, with Markelle Fultz, you get another close to $10 million off of him if he goes, just because he hasn't worked out and he's kind of falling out of the rotation after this season. He's a guy that they could find and replace. Who knows what happens with Joe Ingles? Joe Ingles has age on him. He's another role guy they could let go of. Gary Harris is also in the mix with that conversation as well. They have that extra money tacked on that they could go after George and be really aggressive about it if they wanted to. I think questions come up that about Paul George on the wing and how Franz and Paolo they fit into that spot with Orlando. My answer to that is, well, look, Orlando needs another guard. I think the story is Orlando needs another backcourt presence with Jalen Suggs. I think they kind of had a mix. They had it tough this year with putting Gary Harris at the 2. Sometimes Cole Anthony would run the 1. Sometimes Markelle Fultz would be out there, and it was just a mishmash of whoever Jamal Mosley could throw out to be the other guard. With Paul George out there, you can have Paul George running a spot up 2 and Jalen Suggs taking the ball up. We saw him do that a lot this year. That also puts Suggs on the point of attack on defense, kind of guarding some of the tough guards you see in the league. So I think you could run Paul George alongside Jalen Suggs in the backcourt, and it could work out nice. Now, I don't know if it's long term. Obviously, Paul George is old, and we don't know how long he'd last. But a short term deal puts Orlando in position to be really competitive within the East, even more so than they were this season. And I think for the next few years, Orlando can make deeper runs into the playoffs, and possibly Paul George still looking for that first NBA championship. So this could be a last chance opportunity to do that with what Orlando has. That'd be tough just because there's other teams who are still kind of really far of Orlando, right in front of Orlando right now as far as progress towards a championship team. But with that being said, you never know. The Timberwolves, I don't think a lot of people had the Timberwolves making the finals this year at the beginning before play started. Obviously, as the season went on, we were starting to think, oh, maybe they can do it. But before the year, we had no idea. Maybe that's what happens with Orlando and Paul George, who's ring hunting, looking for a good fit. I think Orlando could be perfect for it.
Once again, it is Alfred Ezman. Please go ahead and check out what he's doing today at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Okay, my top free agent. I don't know why he still is, but he is going to be hitting 40. But he still has, at times, demonstrated the fact that he could still do quite well out there for you. And that is, of course, the guy who probably will not be a free agent for long in LeBron James. But there's still rumors that he's out there. The latest one people are toying with is because they have some cap space, they can do this, is Philadelphia. But LeBron James, I don't know. You're going to have to convince me hard that he's going to go ahead and walk away from a 2+1 that he can sign for upwards of around $160 million if he stays in LA. He could get close to that in Philly if they really want to spend their entire allotment of their, that's doesn't include whatever that they have to go in. At my next thought on my next free agent. Your thoughts, my friend, on LeBron James and a possible free agency.
Right. Before I slip up again, I just want to reiterate and just make sure he has that really expensive player option with LA still, right? The $50-ish million.
Yep, he still has, but he can walk away from it here.
Right.
Rather shortly.
He's kind of in the catbird seat then, I think. I mean, he either can get a fresh start somewhere new and get pretty much just as much as you said with Philly, or stay in LA and get the bank, right up on his doorstep. So I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure what he wants to do at this point. Yeah, he can try to, pull it out with LA again. I would never count out. The most
ridiculous one is Phoenix. People thought because they're possibly working out Bronny, that if they draft Bronny, that they're going to get LeBron. LeBron is going to sign for the minimum.
Right. Seriously. Yeah. I mean, no, Phoenix is towards the bottom of cap space in the league. They might be, I think they might be last. Let me look real quick.
They are, because I think Golden State jumps ahead of them, especially after they when they waive Chris Paul, they get rid of $30 million off their cap before taxes. So if that's the case, I do think that puts Phoenix as the highest salary cap. They're in the second apron. They could only sign LeBron James on a minimum contract, which I don't think that he would accept.
No, the only way in any kind of universe that would happen is if he does that for a year with Bronny and then retires. That is the only way I could possibly see it. And even then, it's like, no, he's not going to take minimum money for that. But I don't think Phoenix wants that either, because and just because actually with Phoenix, I don't even know what they want right now. They kind of have shot themselves in the foot so many times with what they're doing to get a title, and they just haven't gotten it. But going back to LeBron and his player option and Philly and that option too. It's one of the top stories, I think, because you really can look at it either way and see the pros and cons of it, and really for LeBron, there's a lot of pros just based on financial compensation. And I'm not, the bottom line is this, I'm still, until he retires, I'm not going to doubt him and, or I'm not going to doubt any team he's on, regardless of whether or not it's Philly, LA, who knows? But I think it just, we'll have to wait and see. It might take a little Bronny compensation. I know Joe Sora won't like this. It might take a little. We're gonna draft Bronny conversation to keep him in LA, but hopefully it doesn't come to that, because I'm with Joe on that little train of we're not doing that. Either way though, it's very interesting. Philly's got to be smart too, because as you said, that would be pretty much all their allotment if they were to do
you
it.
Want to spend it towards that, or spend it towards against 2-3 other players that could better help your team? So that's
i.e. Paul George. Yeah. Just throwing that out there. So
Paul George, but maybe
right.
Another player on top of that. Yeah.
Right. But I that's what I think. I just think either way, LeBron's in the catbird seat financially, and I think he's going to pick and choose where he wants to be to pretty much end his career at this point.
Once again, it is Alfred Ezman from the OrlandoMagicDaily.com website, part of the fan-sided experience. Go ahead and check it out today. All the great stuff that he's doing there at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. I want to ask you this, Alfred, when it comes to who is next on your list in regards to NBA free agents.
Ooh, next on my list, I don't know. It's not very impactful. I think it's not league breaking, but one that is Tobias Harris. Longtime 76er. Really? I just want to bring him up for a sec, just because
bane of the Philadelphia fans' existence.
Yeah. Oh, he gets so much flack from them, and
he'll probably play well now that he's not being paid a absorbent amount of money.
No, right, and I think one possible place for him, looking at cap space, all that good stuff. Detroit has the most in the NBA right now, just because of their age and whatnot. That is a place that keeps getting thrown in with his name. That's why I'm saying it's not league shattering, that move right there, obviously. But I do think from the standpoint with what Detroit wants, it gives Tobias Harris an opportunity to kind of regrow and, reinvigorate what he's about again. Because he was a very solid role player for a good bit of his career in Philly, no matter what Philly fans will say about him. And I think
we'll take him on the Lakers if he'll sign for the minimum.
There you go. Right. And that's very possible too. At this point, Tobias Harris could do that, but I do think if Detroit wants to spend a little, they can do it. It shouldn't be a lot, and it shouldn't be for a lot of years, but Detroit has all the funds in the world right now heading into this offseason, and they can do it if they want. They have a lot of room to improve their team. I'd expect that's one team to make a big move. Tobias Harris probably isn't the biggest of moves they can make, but it's certainly one to get a role guy in. And to get a leader in for some of those young guys in a team that, obviously just wasn't cutting it this season.
Player that I have in mind just came off of a Eastern Conference Finals run for Pascal Siakam.
Yeah.
Because he is an unrestricted free agent. Yes, he did make some mistakes down the stretch of some of these games, but he did play at a level where he was at times really good, especially in that New York series. He had some really dominant performances. So if that's the case, as a that's the thing. I think as a number one or number two guy, this is where you run as a problem with Pascal. But if you can find him as a 2 or a 3, Philly would be the place I would probably start him at, as far as maybe instead, if you're not looking at Paul George, you may look at Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, and he certainly, made a good run with the Pacers. They, I don't know if a lot of people I certainly didn't put stock in them against the New York Knicks in that series, and they were able to pull it out in that classic, rivalry. Thank God that got brought back. That was such a good series, just from a promotional standpoint and play standpoint. But, that was one of the big trades me and you talked about at the deadline, him going somewhere, and he ended up there. And we talked about how, that would fit well with Tyrese Halliburton, and it would kind of, make the offense even more dynamic with what he was able to provide. It could do the same in Philly because, obviously Philly's losing the 2 or 3 role player in Tobias Harris somewhere. They're also losing Buddy Hield, who I believe is unrestricted somewhere as well. Not that, say what you want about Buddy Hield's performance, but it's another role guy Philly's losing. Pascal Siakam fills those holes a little bit, and it could be a good move. Philly, we're throwing their name around left and right. They're a team that's going to make some moves this offseason if they want to stay in title contention.
Well, they have to. Well, they got rid of their entire team. They'll only have right now three or four players on their roster, and that includes the player that I'm talking about, restricted free agent Tyrese Maxey, who is going, like I said, restricted free agent. He will be tendered an offer by Philadelphia after the great postseason and overall season that he had for Philadelphia. Do you think he's a max player? That's the question I put out to you, Alfred.
That's I think he's teetering on the brink, if not one. I think that's my short answer. And to explain that, I think when you look at guard play, I don't know if there's a lot better out there you can get. Maybe a trade with Trae Young. He's not a free agent. Trade with Trae Young, but besides the point, besides that, I don't know if there's a lot better guards out there you can get, to replace him. And I think it's not the worst thing in the world to give Tyrese Maxey a max contract. I love him to death. I think he's a great scorer. He's a big-time playmaker. He had a lot of clutch moments this season.
So you think he's a max player?
I think if push comes to shove,
you're trying to buy yourself into it. I can tell.
Right. No, yeah. But I think if push comes to shove here and, teams are offering him and Philly has to match, Philly might go ahead and say, look, this guy's young. He's a dynamic player. We may not be able to make other moves like a Siakam or, blah, blah, blah on the side. But to have that at your core, I think is key to keeping your team good and towards where you want to go. Because I don't know if Philly's ready to, complete, like you said, there's, have 3-4 players current, whatever. I don't know if they're ready to necessarily blow it up and, do this whole start over thing. I think that's foolish after what they had going this season. Granted, the Embiid injury put a stump in it, but they have the on paper, recipe. I think they need to do it if push comes to shove. If you can get away with it and just, match once and Maxey says, I want to stay here. Great. That's really great for both parties. But I think, if Maxey's smart, he can get a max out of it with the way he can twist, Philly's situation.
This is when you pay your agents. This is when they earn their keep and their money.
Right.
What I want to say, though, is would you go, if you're Philadelphia, would you go the route of getting one big name to go alongside Embiid and Maxey, or would you try to build and construct a team with all that open cap space?
I would go. I think I'd run back Maxey and Embiid and add a player on the side. And I think you really got to think about it for a bit and evaluate what you want that to be, because that's going to be crucial. And I think that's going to be your final time where you say, or your final stretch of time where you say, this is our chance to win a title with that. Because I think after that, you're starting to turn it into a Phoenix situation where it's like, all right, you're running out of time. So I do think I think that's the route you go, because I think if you try to construct a team, you're going to run into, restraints with what you can pay, and you're going to want, players who are good enough to get you to a title, but they're too much money. So you're going to have to go with someone a little less good for less money, and it's going to turn into a nightmare. I think the simpler route to go is Embiid, Maxey, and a player you can pay on the side that is good enough to help those two and assist those two and bringing them to their top level so you can win a championship.
The next player on my list, unless you have one in mind that you got right now that you got to talk about, but the next player on my list is Miles Bridges of Charlotte. Your thoughts, a player that this time last year, well, actually, there was a time where he was on the verge of free agency. Everything was looking great. Then all of a sudden, the next day, he gets arrested, and he went through quite a bit of legal troubles. On the verge of becoming what at that time was going to be $150-200 million deal, most likely. With Charlotte. Did eventually come back to Charlotte. Did score 20 points a game, 37% from three. So good score. in the league. Adequate defense for the most part. Your thoughts on Miles Bridges, and if he stays in Charlotte for the money or he goes somewhere else?
Well, Gerald, you know what's interesting? I just talked about, and you just asked me, a third player along with Maxey and Embiid. Maybe a small forward sounds very suitable to have that third player replace him, especially since you had Tobias Harris leaving.
They
So
worked really well with them with Kelly Oubre, who also came from Charlotte.
Correct. So that's why I think that might be a good fit. I think Miles Bridges has still got it in him. Now, I think with all that legal trouble, he lost his opportunity, at least for the time being, to be a super max player. In fact, that time might be slipping. He's 26, late 20s now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
He's in his
prime.
That
time, right? So he still has at least a small window of opportunity to get a max again. But if he wants to go out there and win a ring, because he doesn't have one yet, obviously, he played in Charlotte. No offense to the Hornets.
No longer taken. They can't defend themselves at this point.
Right. At this point, there's nothing they could do. But I think that's a really good opportunity. And it's funny that you said that you mentioned him right after, because the minute you were talking about it, I was like, whoa, that seems like the player that Philly can go out and get, because they have the space for a guy like that. He's productive enough. He's good enough on the defensive end, all around good enough. He doesn't need to be that guy either. You have Maxey and Embiid. He doesn't need to be that guy. That's the perfect fit for that situation. So I think if I'm Miles Bridges, I'm looking at an opportunity to go to a team where I can make a difference to contend, or I could just flat out contend with them. So I think Philly's a top spot for him for that reason.
Once again, it is Alfred Ezman, OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Be a good place for him. Getting on one trade thing, I threw it by Joe and Sean. They kind of brushed off because he does have a bad rep and injury prone and all that. But speaking of Charlotte, if they really want to do a blow up,
right?
Would you think if you're the Lakers, you might want to throw something by them for Lonzo Ball?
Oh,
often injured, but 20-point scorer, can shoot pretty good from behind the arc, distributor.
I think if you really want to do it, I don't know how much you'd give, because
a LaMelo Ball. Yes, right.
Yes.
Lonzo Ball has the bad knees. Sorry, I get my balls mixed up there. Ha ha ha. Go ahead. Yes, LaMelo Ball.
So I think when I look at the Hornets and what they have, obviously they just drafted Brandon Miller, who had a pretty dang good rookie season. I think Charlotte, depending on how their GM feels, if they feel like they can use Brandon Miller as the centerpiece to what they're trying to build around, I think a LaMelo Ball trade could be in the works, especially with LaMelo being hurt, a good bit at this point. I think that's very well possible. I'd be careful though if I'm LA. I don't know if I.
But that's why you buy low. You don't give them a premium package for someone who does not have a history. So that's why I'm thinking if Charlotte just wants to move on from that experience of LaMelo Ball, if they were thinking about it. So
and I'll say this too. For how LaMelo Ball plays, he's flashy, explosive, makes these cool passes and stuff. It'd be a perfect fit for LA if he was healthy and he was doing that. It would be almost like, not saying he's Magic Johnson, but it would be like a Showtime sort of feel to it with the way he plays at the guard spot. And I think it'd be really cool, to see that. So again, I'm with you, Gerald. Lowball it, obviously, to start. But Charlotte,
I would just call. Throw something out there, something, what player and a pick.
Right.
See where it goes from there. Yeah.
Something slight, right? Something to give Charlotte to build off of too. And I think if Charlotte, on Charlotte's end, thinking about it, if I'm the Charlotte GM, you have the key to all this. I think is you have Brandon Miller. I think you have Brandon Miller, and he's a guy who you can build around with how he played his rookie season and where you drafted him, as a top 5 pick. So obviously you got to work with him and see if he pans out. It is something to think about, because this could turn into, it's not the exact same thing, but a Trae Young, DeJounte Murray situation where it's your duo you're trying to build off of, and it's just not clicking. It could very well turn into that, and it looks like it with how LaMelo Ball's hurt all the time. So an interesting thought. I think it's possible, but again, the two keys to this are Charlotte has to feel like they can build around Brandon Miller solely, and the Lakers have to lowball it, to keep themselves out of giving up too much for a player who is very, very much injury prone.
Getting back to the free agents, okay, we're going to head back to the 2015 NBA All-Star game as DeMar DeRozan and James Harden are going to be on the list still as unrestricted free agents. So your thoughts with DeMar DeRozan? I think of the two, probably this one will probably have a little bit more interest. He has talked about re-signing with Chicago. He's talked about coming back home to LA because he was from LA and he played with USC. But your thoughts, my friend, if he goes to the Lakers or the Clippers, DeRozan has to go and get a pay cut. If he stays with Chicago, he'll get paid a lot more. Your thoughts on DeMar DeRozan?
Well, I think if I'm Chicago, I'm not doing that. Just, I think, you're very thankful for what DeMar DeRozan got you. He was a very good player this year. I'm looking at his averages: 24 a game, 4 rebounds a game, 5 assists a game, 48% from the field. That's a very solid, player to have in your arsenal. But I think with what Chicago's done so far, with this, how they ended up in the play-in and whatnot, they're just kind of stuck in that no man's land. I think any NBA team hates to be in where that is your climax.
They're smack dab in purgatory. Eric said it himself right there. Yes.
And my team was in there not too long ago, and it's not with Aaron Gordon and Vucevic. It's not where you want to be as an NBA team, because that is your peak and you can't break past it. So you want to blow it up. Chicago's at that point now. Part of that is getting rid of DeMar DeRozan. And I think if I'm DeMar, I want to look for maybe a title opportunity. I understand the LA thing, and that would be very cool coming back home, and it would take a pay cut with the Clippers and Lakers to do that. But I think also, if LeBron, keeps that team option with the Lakers and just decides to stay, I think DeMar DeRozan going there changes the dynamic a little bit in a good way for the Lakers. DeMar DeRozan is still a very productive player on the scoring end. I talked about that being a need at the deadline for the Lakers, kind of a guard that gives you that scoring edge a little bit more than what you had currently. And I think he fits the bill on that. So I think that's a very good place he could be. The Clippers, it's a little more unknown just because, James Harden's out, Paul George is out. We just really don't know what it would be. DeMar could replace those guys. I just don't know if he has the ability to carry a team far like he did, let's say, Toronto years ago with that, through the playoffs. So I think LA is a very good fit for him. And I think on the Bulls end, they're at that purgatory point and they need to blow it up and start again. And part of that is getting rid of DeMar.
Well, I'll tell you what, he just comes off a season, 79 games, almost 38 minutes a game. So he could still log in minutes for you in case LeBron or AD is out of the game. So, and he could still fill it up for when you need it. So yeah, DeMar DeRozan would be an interesting name for me if you could get him on the cheap, but also James Harden. He found himself a good situation with the Clippers. Ultimately didn't work out because they are the Clippers. Your thoughts, my friend? I mean, if you're the Clippers, you need to fill that brand new shiny arena with the nice fancy toilets there. If you're looking at the Steve Ballmer Dome or whatever it is, the Intuit Dome, whatever the hell they call it. I actually drove by it while it was in construction, so I don't know exactly how the end product is going to look. But if you're Steve Ballmer and Lawrence Frank in the Clipper land out there, do you look to re-sign James Harden just for a name to sell on the billboards on the LA freeways?
Yeah, you can, but James Harden, I think, is no longer the player. I think he would sell tickets, just strictly that. But I think if you're going to want to win, and that would be my goal, no duh, if I ran an organization, James Harden isn't the guy anymore. He's not a bad player. I still think he's, can provide something, but he's not what he once was and what we once knew him to be. Taking less shots a game, taking less threes a game. Percentages are a little down, but not brutally down by any means. He's still rebounding, kind of like as he used to. Assists are a little bit down from what he used to have for the past 5 years. He was in double figures with that. He's 8.5 this year. And the biggest drop off, just by notice, is points. He went from a 20-point scorer a game since, COVID to right around 16.5 this year. So it's a drop off to I don't know if I want to say role player, but at the let's just for the respect of James Harden, a second option on a team. And I don't think that's the Clippers can be successful with it, but I don't know if it's high seed in the West success or I don't know if it's I don't know if it's like they had this year. Obviously, I don't know if James Harden by himself can do it. In fact, James Harden cannot do what the Clippers did this year by himself if he were to stay. So I think if they want to sell tickets, yes, absolutely they can do it. But with from the standpoint of winning, I think it sets them back a tad. And I think James Harden, on a personal note, if he's going to want to be, a guy who's on a team that's winning and being competitive late into the playoffs, he can go elsewhere and, help that team out, whatever it might be.
A lot of these older guys are going to be ring chasing. It's around
Yes.
that time that they are in the, they don't have like DeRozan, like Harden, like Harris, like some of these
Paul
guys
George.
that are over Paul George. These guys are over 30. They have not won a ring. And now you're going to see him go from team to team to team looking for those rings. They're at that point. I mean, it's okay in a way if they've still got some juice left in the tank, but it's kind of sad in other ways because you'll see them slide down the rotation a little more to a little more, not being able to do what they once did.
Right. And James Harden, I think James Harden kind of has already started doing that. I think once he gave up on Houston because of the Warriors and what they were doing and, just kind of beating him every year. I think he just, he jumped to Brooklyn, jumped to Philly, jumped to LA. And I think he started doing that. He's in that cycle already. And Paul George, not as much. I think Paul George is a little more methodic with where he's gone. He stayed there for a few years. His Oklahoma City stint, he had that for a little bit. Obviously the Clippers stint where we had Indiana. The problem he had in Indiana was he couldn't beat LeBron James in the Heat. And I think, now at this point, Paul George has reached that point. I think Harden's already been at that point. But yeah, some of these players now they're just going to jump and take a good 2 to 3 year deal, maybe 4 years if they're lucky. I wouldn't give any of these guys 4 years, but a 2 to 3 year deal at the minimum for a good lump sum of money that these teams with a lot of cap have. And if they do it, I think they could be in a position to win a ring if they're really put their mind to it. And I think certain guys can do it. Like James Harden can still be that good support guy to a team that already has pieces around it. Paul George, I think Paul George is a step ahead of James Harden in being that piece, and they still very much so can do it. So I think that's just that's just the point they're at, and yeah, I think it's starting to show.
It's so funny because Tobias Harris on this list that I'm looking at from the USA Today was listed much higher than other free agents or pending free agents at the time, including OG Anunoby, who you knew was a vital part of when he was healthy and in there for the New York Knicks. Their record was tremendous with him in the lineup. D'Angelo Russell, who, yes, we've all talked about as far as his failures in the playoffs, but look at what he did after the calendar year turned to 2024 and how well he shot and what he did for himself. And also as well, looking at players like Malik Monk, who before he got injured, one of the best 6 men that's out there. Nick Claxton, Jonas Valanciunas. There's some solid players out there, and there also is a guy that will go down in the Hall of Fame, but he's rapidly, the opinions on him are rapidly changing from what they once did, and the conundrum that the Golden State Warriors will have in Klay Thompson. So we could talk about those other guys here in a minute. We'll go back up, especially D'Angelo Russell. We'll touch on them. But Klay Thompson is one I wanted you to talk about because of the fact that the knee, the Achilles, just has not had what he once did, especially on the defensive end. He didn't end his season on a good note, going 0 for 10 from the three-point line. I think, 0 for 10 overall against Sacramento. So your thoughts on where it stands now with Klay Thompson, what he could still do for a team?
Yeah, I think he's obviously not Klay Thompson of old, winning titles with the Warriors, and we all know that at this point. I think where he's at is he's wanting to go, or he's going to go to a team that kind of needs that leader in the rotation. I don't know if it's this extreme yet. Actually, it might not be, but it kind of reminds me a little of what Joe Ingles was for the Magic this year. Kind of a guy who a role player who came off the bench, still could shoot the three. Joe Ingles could shoot the three. Don't get me wrong. But a guy who's out there and takes right around 5 to 10 shots a game total on a very good night. I think that's where Klay Thompson has gone to. I think, and there could be teams that kind of need that old leadership to them. The Pistons, once again, the Pistons have a lot. Gerald, I don't know if you know this. They have like a lot of cap space. And I
wonder why.
Yeah, I do wonder why. But I do think Klay Thompson is a guy they can get for absolutely kind of almost nothing. And it's still like a good old fit that can be put into their organization from a championship leadership and wisdom standpoint for the future. Obviously, guys like Cade Cunningham and whatnot and the rest of their young guys are going to play more. But I do think he's going to come off the bench and provide at least a little something for a team like that, and possibly can just, make them a little bit better and put them in a position to maybe get towards the play-in more than they were this season. So I think that's where Klay's at. I think Klay's a older, I've been around the block a little bit guy who can go in 5 to 10 shots a game, come in and rotate, take, a 3 or 2 and knock them down in a big spot while the starters rest. And, it's sad. Yeah, it's sad for me. He was a guy who I watched all the time, and it was unbelievable what him and Steph could do. We all remember that game 6 where he just exploded, and it's come to this, but every player comes to this, I think, eventually, maybe not to this extreme level, but they come to this point where this happens. And for Klay, I think this is the next step in his career before he begins to consider retirement.
What it would be like if Klay signs a contract with Detroit and he's making less than what the head coach is making.
Yeah. Oh God.
For a team that bad.
Can you imagine being, I don't know, in 2016 and hearing that's going to be the reality almost 10 years down the road with him? Crazy stuff. But yeah, I think, that's where he's at. I do think, for Detroit, if they want to break the bank just a tad and do that, though, I do think that's another good move that they can make.
So with that in mind, also as well, KCP, I want to throw his name in there with a player option because he is probably going to walk away from his last year of his contract as well with the Denver Nuggets. Bruce Brown with a team option. They may keep it. It is kind of expensive, and it depends. If they keep Bruce Brown, they'll probably utilize him in a trade halfway through the season if that's the case. Well, we'll see. We'll see. But of those names I mentioned earlier, when it comes to Malik Monk, Nick Claxton, Jonas Valanciunas, D'Angelo Russell, OG Anunoby, which one is most intriguing to you?
Well, I'll do it for the sake of the channel, but I also genuinely think it's the most intriguing too. D'Angelo Russell. I think you've heard me talk about him a little bit. I love what he can provide. Again, it's not going to be, I don't think he's like the star player of a team at all, but if your star player is not in your backcourt, I do think he's a great piece to have. The Lakers, were an example of that, I think, because you had LeBron and AD who weren't necessarily taking the ball up the floor every single possession like a guard would. But with D'Angelo, I mean, the numbers still are pretty good. At the end of the year, I understand he had his troubles in crucial spots during the season, but 18 points a game, 41.5 from 3, I think is amazing, especially on 7 shots. 45.5-ish from the field, taking 14 shots a game, a lot of minutes too, 32. He still can provide, and he's, getting up there near his 30s as well. He's probably right at 30-ish. I don't know if you know the exact age he is, but
D'Angelo?
Yeah.
He's 29, I believe, right now. I'll just confirm that for you.
Yeah, but either way, he's right at 30, and he's still playing a lot of minutes, making a lot of shots. He's playing like he just got into the league and is, a premier rookie that everyone's looking at, in my opinion. And I think a team like that can use it.
As of now.
28, got it. I think certain teams will love that. Coming back to me again. Orlando, hello. I think certain teams would love that. And I think, he can fit into a squad that their missing piece is a guard, to contend to the next level that they need. And I think that's what makes him the most intriguing. I guess I'll break away from him for a sec. Jonas Valanciunas as well. I think, I think at a certain point, we all knew that time in New Orleans was coming to an end with him. I just think he was there long enough, and nothing's come out of it. So he's bound to leave, but he was, he was doing his thing, relatively well, 12 points a game. He was not their main scorer. There's no secret about that. but 12 points a game, 56% shooting. That's pretty good for a big man who works around the rim. 8 rebounds a game. His rebounds did drop off, and that's my one concern with him because he used to be a double-figure rebounder. Now he's dropped below that, and I think that's just coming with age maybe, but I think certain teams would like that as well if they can pay for it and they need a center just for the short time being to kind of make them a little more to put themselves in a little more contention, in the league. So Jonas also fits that bill, kind of like D'Angelo Russell a little bit of, okay, our missing piece is a center. I think D'Angelo Russell's a little more long-term than Jonas Valanciunas is, but Jonas is kind of like the other end of the spectrum in the front court.
I was just going to tell Kurt Affair that if the Toronto Raptors decide to keep Brown, and they would probably have to utilize him in a trade going forward, but at $23 million, it would be an expiring deal, but that is a hefty price to play for a guy that I think the best that you'll ever get out of him was his run with Denver, Alfred.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sad to say myself on saying that, but it's probably the best you'll see him.
Right. Yeah. And I think a part of that is, he was in a little bit of more of a player role in that team anyway, because of Jamal Murray and Jokic being that duo that got them that title. And I think Bruce Brown got used to that. So I don't know if Toronto or even Indiana expected more out of him in particular, but I think that would have been, I think that was a mistake in general if they did, but just because, you had to see the position he was in. Granted, he was great in that NBA Finals. Superb in that NBA Finals. But I do think if you look at it from the general standpoint of, what role he fills, it is not your number one player. I don't even think, I'm with you, Gerald. I don't even think it's your number 2 player anymore, if I'm being honest. I think it's a 3 at best, your third option at best, at the very best. And Toronto, I think Toronto doesn't need that. Toronto needs to find their number 1 option right now. And that's why they're using him in a trade. And yeah, I think that's the scenario with that. So that's where I'd be with Bruce Brown. I think Bruce Brown is a good role option to have in your rotation and high up in your rotation. Don't get me wrong. Bruce Brown, if teams want to do it, he can come off the bench pretty early in your game and provide something. But I think that's where he's at this point. I think Toronto doesn't really need to worry about that at this moment.
I mentioned KCP earlier. He is going to has a player option on his team. Although he didn't give Denver this year as just quite enough as much as what he did last year, he's still at 31. May be able to give you 2 or 3 more solid seasons, especially on the defensive end. And as a guy who can hit 40% from behind the arc, he is someone that may still be very much desired in the league. Where do you see him going? He is a clutch client, so we'll just leave that out there for you. But do you see him staying in Denver or going somewhere else?
He could go somewhere else. And I talked about this team with the Trae Young trade, not free agency trade that they could make. But
hey, I got my LaMelo and Lonzo's mixed up. So
right,
we're all
right.
Good. We're all good.
One of these moments right here.
Yes.
But going back to that, San Antonio, the cat's out of the bag. San Antonio, I think from the standpoint of, listen, that roster, I think outside of Wembanyama needs just some shifting and work, because you have the future of basketball in the palm of your hand, and you have, bags of garbage around it. And what KCP can do, I think you need to draft another player that's going to be dynamic enough to work with Wemby. That's the first step if you're San Antonio.
And he's not gonna like losing for very much longer with your Wemby.
Nope. Yep. And I think, if you're looking at the circle around him, it starts with the draft, obviously. That's a whole nother conversation though. From the free agent standpoint, KCP's a start, and especially with San Antonio, they're top 5 in the league in cap space, or they're 6th. They're right outside the top 5 in the league in cap space, which is still a lot. And I think KCP, obviously, with his age, with the production slipping just a bit, and not too much though. I mean, he can still provide, but just a bit slipping. He could definitely, you could definitely pay him a little bit on a small contract, and he would be able to provide something on the defensive end of the floor. And that might be the identity San Antonio goes to. You know what I mean? Because Wemby was very well, just a little bit short of winning Defensive Player of the Year in his rookie season. And if they want to go that route, that's perfect. So, I mean, I think that's a good start for San Antonio. I think they could definitely make a bigger splash, if they will, in free agency alongside KCP. But that's the second move they can make with the, I guess, remainder of their allotment they have after that big move.
Some big things are coming down the pike. We didn't even mention what New Orleans may do, because New Orleans, not only do they have the choice that they can keep the Lakers pick on the first this year or next year, but they've also, David Griffith on his closing arguments before they left for the season said, we need to make some changes. So I'd watch out for New Orleans. There's going to be several teams this offseason that are going to make some big moves, whether it's free agency or trades. So definitely we're going to go ahead and keep an eye on that. But Alfred, is there any more free agents or potential free agents that might be catching your eye for a team out there this summer?
Looking down the list here, I got a list in front of me too on Sport Track. That's what I've been using during this conversation. Very good site, by the way, for those of you who are nerds about it like I am. A little bit, I guess, just because of the name, we talked about James Harden selling tickets, Russell Westbrook, all jokes aside.
I kind of ignored him on purpose, because if you've heard
right.
my rants before on Westbrook on this show, you'll understand why.
Right. He has a player option right now in LA that's pretty cheap, right around $4 million. He could very well take that if he wanted to. In fact, I do think that's the more likely option that's going to happen.
He's only going to be offered a minimum out there by anyone.
Right. But I do think, I guess just from, it's sort of like a Klay Thompson wisdom sort of thing with, it's a player that used to be, way back, this is the nostalgia trip I'm taking, but way back in the day, triple double king, in OKC, that sort of thing. I think a team, if they want to pay him the minimum, or a team that has a lot of money and just wants to, spend it for the sake of spending it to get players and names out there, Westbrook is the option to have for a guy who's at the back end of your rotation and provide some sort of spark, in games that you need it. I mean, I think he still has that play tough mentality to him, and regardless of what his stat line shows, I think that's just the other name to throw out there. Again, the player option is the most likely. In fact, pretty much I'd have to go 80-20, 90-10, 80-90. He takes the player option, with my confidence with that. But it's just something to note, just because I think, he's a big name that, all fans around the NBA identify with, and he can, bring tickets in for the Clippers, or he can just be a wisdom guy at a team looking to build.
Before we head on out, actually, JSJ in our chat made some good suggestions. Andre Drummond, as a big guy who performed really well for Chicago at times when he wasn't accidentally undermining his own team. That famous game he had earlier this season on 2 occasions where he blocked a dunk attempt because he thought it was supposed to be a lob, and then he hurt himself, I think, like right after that play. This is crazy. Right. But yeah, Kelly Oubre Jr., who really reclaimed his name with a good season in Philadelphia, despite getting hit by a car off the court. And Lonnie Walker, who he was injured, but shot very well from behind the arc. I know a lot of Lakers fans were upset that he left, but he is not proven to be healthy for an entire season, which could be a problem. But your thoughts on any one of those players before we head on out?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with Andre Drummond. Again, he didn't need to be, just because this guy was hurt too. They have DeMar DeRozan, who could score the ball a lot. Zach LaVine as well. That's the guy I was referencing. He is hurt a lot, but they have him as well, and he's a pure scorer too. Drummond averaged 8 points a game, but he did bring in 9 rebounds. And I think at age 30, that's fine. I don't know. It's kind of like Valanciunas a little. I believe it's taken a dip just a tad. In fact, actually, it's gone up. He had a really bad year rebounding.
He played more because Vucevic was out of the lineup, and also Vucevic just did not have a good year.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So he was in there more, and I think it kind of re-sparked him a little bit. I don't know. That's like not the biggest center name, obviously, to have, but it is something, if you need to fill that role, badly to contend, it's not a bad option to turn your head at. Lonnie Walker, I'm with you. I've always loved his shooting. Again, the injuries are a little bit of a problem, so be careful with your money. If you're a GM out there or a team out there looking to spend on that, just know that you have that risk along with him. And then the other one, Oubre. Yeah, that's who it was. Oubre. I think he's a solid role player at this point. Again, not going to be this crazy big option, but his shooting numbers aren't bad. Pretty not too good from 3-point range, but I think that's pretty much expected from him at this point. Good getting the ball to the rim, mid range, that sort of thing, 2-point shots. And once again, he could fill the role of a guy off the wing if you want it. So that's how I feel about those guys. Kind of like in the pot of know what you're going to get and spend your money wisely. But if you need that kind of role that I explained specifically with each, go ahead and do it.
No, he is 30. I want to make a correction, Daniel. Daniel, he is 30. Andre Drummond is 30 years old. So
I was shocked.
That. Yeah.
I was shocked too. I thought he was older. I'm with Daniel on that, but
I was looking at sports. No, actually, no, he is 31. He'll be 31.
Oh.
If you look at Sport Track, it says 31 unrestricted free agent for 24-25. So he is 31.
Okay.
So yes, he is 31. So he's 30. He was born in August. So he's 30 right now, but he'll be 31 to start the season, to put it in a little bit clearer context. But he has been around forever because he started early. He got drafted early. So yeah, he's been around 12 years. My God, time flies. But
wow.
Yeah, Daniel, I thought he was a lot older. He looks a lot older, but yeah, he'll be 31 when the season starts coming up next. But he can rebound better than virtually anyone still at his profession. So if you're in need in rebounding, it didn't really work out the first time when he was on the Lakers. So I don't know if that's where you want to go, but he did have a good season with Chicago. So I'll leave it at that. And I think that Chicago, you should try to go ahead and do what you can to get rid of Vucevic and LaVine.
Yes.
If you can do that, I don't care how far it takes back your record this season. It is best for your organization going forward.
Right. I agree too. Again, we talked about it earlier. They might be, it's either, I think them and the Hawks, in my opinion, are at a tie for purgatory, the Kings of purgatory right now. And with Chicago, they really need to hit the reset button bad. Granted, some of the guys they have did play well for them, but yeah, I think at this point it's time to look out elsewhere at your future. And you have pieces for your future. One guy I do love for them, just a quick side note, Kobe White. I think Kobe White, we saw little flashes of what he can do. Very good young guard. They have him for a bit still because he got drafted pretty recently. So you have the younger side of your team to you. I think it's time to start building around that in the draft and, in free agency if you want to pick up some players if you can.
JSJ, remember, if the Suns trade Beal, he has a no trade clause. So he would have to say yes to the trade. And if he does, I think there's a trade kicker that goes to Beal if he is traded and he decides to be traded. So I think that he would have to also waive if you want to save money there. But yeah, I don't think Beal probably wants to be traded again unless he's absolutely unhappy. So LaVine, I know Chicago wants to get off that contract and the Vucevic contract. Bad.
Yeah.
Really bad.
Yeah. What we just talked about, because that's the purgatory contracts that they have right now. And I feel so bad for Nikola Vucevic because he's kind of just been stuck in that for his entire career with teams, and it just stinks for him. Obviously, he didn't.
Nobody forced him to sign that 4-year, $100 million contract there, Alfred.
Very, very fair. Yes, and he probably saw the double zeros and was like, I kind of like this actually. Let me do it real quick. But from just the result standpoint of his career, it just kind of has been meh, for what his teams have been able to do. But yeah, the Bulls need to get out of those quick because they need to start building around some young players.
Once again, it is Alfred Ezman. You can go ahead and check out what he's doing today at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. And before we head on out, I want to go ahead and make sure that you have the time to go ahead and let everybody know what you're up to and what you're writing on with OrlandoMagicDaily.com and anything else you want to go ahead and get everybody up to date on before we head on out.
Yeah, so I've been a little quiet on Orlando Magic Daily. The reason for that has been baseball season is obviously in the height of everything around it, not only just the MLB regular season with race-colored glasses, but also I don't know if anyone out there follows college baseball, but the NCAA tournament is about to start up for that. I've been working with Southeastern 14. I was down in Hoover, Alabama, covering the SEC tournament, and also just preparing for regionals, previews for that with pretty much every team in the tournament, just going over their lineup and their averages and stats and whatnot, and just kind of getting a feel for how the tournament's going to be. So that's probably why I thought Trae Young was a free agent, was because I was just so busy doing that. I'll use that as the excuse for it. So that's what I've been up to with that stuff. So if you're a college baseball fan out there, I know there's some teams on the West Coast in the Santa Barbara regional. That'll be an interesting little regional they have. I believe that's Fresno State, Oregon, obviously Santa Barbara, and there's one more team, I'm not sure. And UC Irvine, if there's any UC Irvine people out there watching on the West Coast, they're an upset team. They're a team who I have who might be upsetting their top seed in their region. So keep an eye out for that. But going back to Orlando Magic Daily, I'm gonna have some stuff out. Obviously, there's a lot of talk with making a big signing. There's pressure on them just to make a big signing in general for ending the year on a Game 7 first round exit. They feel like they can take the next step, and that's going to come in the free agency market. It's not going to be the draft, which is shocking, but that's the situation there. And then NFL, Buffalo down with the Bills, kind of in a lull. The NFL news right now, just random stuff popping in and out. The teams are doing their spring / summer. They're almost done now with spring OTAs, but that's where they were at. So they're kind of in their summer lulls of just evaluating where they're at, how much talent they have, and that's really it. I'm trying to think what else.
Alfred's got Kurt's got a question for you. Do you know whatever happened to Kumar Rocker?
For those of you who don't know, Kumar Rocker was an incredible pitcher at Vandy, won a national title. Kumar Rocker is in the minor league somewhere. Here it is. I just looked it up. The Hickory Crawdads. He's at the high A team for the Texas Rangers. So the Rangers have Jack Leiter, a very good pitcher. I don't know what's up with him, but he is somewhere in their system. And they also have Kumar Rocker. They have two very good pitchers. Now, Kumar Rocker, if you're in high A, I'm not sure if y'all follow baseball, but high A means you have a good bit before you get to the major leagues. And that's where Kumar Rocker's at. But yeah, I mean, Kumar Rocker was a great college pitcher. It just goes to show how hard it is for these guys in baseball with, the minor league system and working your way up. And regardless of how you were in college and high school heading into it, that's where Kumar is. God, I didn't know people who watched your show knew who that guy was. I'm impressed with that.
Kurt is just a whiz at everything. So
right.
He's some of the best that we got, but it's just so funny that, I always forget the names of some of these minor league
teams.
The Hickory Crawdads. Let's go, Crawdads. Let's go, Crawdads. Let's go.
Oh God, Gerald, some of the ones where I'm from, the Charleston River Dogs is one. Let's go River Dogs down in Charleston, South Carolina. Just the weirdest names. You can get away with it too, because it's not the big money drawing market of an MLB team, and you need to find a way to sell your stuff and to sell your brand, and that's the way you do it. It's just have a funky little name, like the Hickory Crawdads with Kumar Rocker leading the charge.
Yes, he does, JSJ. Yes, he does. But yes, the Hickory Crawdads. Let's go, Crawdads. Let's go. But I will say it is great to have you here. Kurt says, thanks, Alfred. I remember Kumar being really good at Vandy. And
very good. Very, very good at Vandy. He was, I don't think he won the national. So the College Baseball World Series, if you get to the national title series, it's best 2 of 3. He won one of those games. Vandy won. I don't know if he won I don't think he won the last one in 2019, but he did win one of those games. So he came up in a big moment there. And I hope he gets to the major league soon, because he was an electric pitcher for Vandy, and Vandy just continues to pump out Major League Baseball talent.
Well, there you go. Absolutely. So for more, head on over to, should they just look off your social, or where did they need to go for your entire portfolio?
I would, social, Alfred Ezman on Twitter. Very simple. Alfred Ezman, first and last name, as it's spelled out onto the screen in front of you. I post all my stuff there. If you want the college baseball stuff, Southeastern 14 is where we're getting ready for the NCAA regionals. That's Southeastern and then the number 14, very easy to find as well. we sometimes do live shows there, but it's mostly recordings and then posts. So either way, we'll have stuff out there and you can watch the live shows after. So we'll have all that out there. But that's why I've been so busy doing that. I haven't been on the basketball train as much. I've been watching the NBA games, but I've just kind of been sidetracked with that currently, and that's kept me occupied. Obviously, with me being on the road too, covering baseball games has kept me occupied. But again, go on Twitter. With my handle, you can find it. And just go on YouTube and just really look up my name. And I think I just pop up with videos I've been on, obviously with Gerald and the Lakers Fast Break, and as well as Southeastern 14.
Eli, you're so funny if you think Braun is actually going to go and take the minimum in Phoenix.
And win the championship on top of that with Bronny. With
Bronny. That's hilarious. I mean, yes, he would walk away from $60 million for $160 million for 3 years, and he would take the minimum in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm. Yuck.
Now, mind you, I wouldn't mind that because, he is, to a lot of people, maybe not the best thing to stay for the Lakers at $160 million. So I kind of say I wouldn't be upset with that, but we'll see. Daniel Park, I wanted to go ahead and get his final question for you. DJ Burns. He says he's got the Zebo bully ball mentality he likes. I understand that, but he doesn't have the Zebo or the Kenny Lofton ability. I don't see him as an NBA player. He does not rebound the ball well at all. 4 rebounds a game at NC State. I just don't see him translating to the next level. I understand he's lost 45 pounds, but he's not there. He's not as good as Kenny Lofton if you want to compare to another big guy. And I just don't think he's anywhere near what Zebo was.
Yeah, and I definitely, I will say this about him. He could definitely be a guy, and there's no shame in this when I say it. He definitely could be a guy in the G League, that thrives there and kind of just builds upon his own game and just develops and whatnot. I don't think he's like a shoe-in to go play in, I don't know, Croatia or something like that overseas. Like he can be a G League guy for a team and, a guy you could thrive on. I believe for the Lakers, is it still South Bay, Gerald?
South Bay Lakers, yes.
Yeah. How about DJ Burns on the South Bay Lakers? I think that'd be a good start to develop and whatnot. And who knows? I mean, we saw that with Lofton in the summer league. That's really where he, kind of shined a little bit. And I'm with Gerald. I don't really think he's Lofton either, but it was a cool story during the NCAA tournament. And sometimes that's all it takes to put your name out there. Another example of that, not to get off on too much of a tangent, 2015, the national title was Duke, Wisconsin. A freshman kid on that Duke team that won it all was Grayson Allen. He came up with a few big steals in that game. And everyone, regardless of how you feel about him or what he's doing now, everyone knows who Grayson Allen is now.
He just signed an $18.5 million per year contract for your team, Eli, out there. So you think LeBron James is going to sign for a contract that's $16 million less?
How about
Grayson Allen?
Gerald, how about that big three? Bronny, LeBron, and Grayson Allen. That sounds that's NBA title bound, it sounds to me.
You think LeBron's James ego would allow him to be paid $16 million less than Grayson
Allen? But yeah, I mean, you just see who knows? But yeah, just to kind of bring it back to DJ Burns, you see stories like that with the NCAA tournament, how players kind of bring a career out of it. And you could say a little bit that 2015 national title with Grayson Allen getting 2 big steals there late kind of helped him. Well, really, it helped his career at Duke because he went on to have a good career at Duke after that. But then it helped him, obviously get an NBA career. So there you go.
He is not projected to be a draft choice, so he would probably have to be on an undrafted 2-way at this point in time if that's the case. But yeah, the thing that stood out to me is how bad of a rebounder for a guy his size that he is. And,
right.
That's to me shameful for a guy 6'9", 275 that only rebounds 4 times a game. That's not the guy I would want on my team unless he figures out something else that's new. But we'll see. But it is, of course, Alfred Ezman. Please go ahead and support him today at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Alfred, great to have you here. I know it's late, 12:45 where you're at, my friend, but any last thoughts before we head on out?
Excited. There's quite a few names in this NBA free agency, names, that are players who are old, kind of starting a ring chase like we talked about, but hopefully they'll sign places that put them in a position to kind of win rings, just flat out do that. Oh, I see. Let me see. Is there anyone underrated in the NBA draft this year you think will pop off as the next star? This is definitely biased based on who I am, and I don't think he's underrated. I think everyone loves him to death. But if you don't know the name Dalton Connect yet, look him up for me. Look him up for me.
He is high as number 5 in some mocks. I'm seeing him now.
I saw whatever pick the Grizzlies have, their top 10. Yeah, I saw that's the projection. That's the biggest projection I saw. I think ESPN had that one, and that'd be awesome to stay in state and play for Memphis if he could do that. The other thing I thought about too, to swing it back, Kurt. Got it. We started the show with this, and we're going to end the show with this. Trae Young trade, San Antonio. Trae Young, Wemby, draft Dalton Connect with one of their lottery picks, and that's a good start for San Antonio to start being competitive. Because with Dalton Connect, I think you get a wing who can get to the rim with ease. Very good three-point shooter, sneakily good three-point shooter for his size. Just a scorer. There were games in college he'd have where it would be 4 ISO plays in a row, and he would score each time. That's an NBA type of game he would have in college. So keep an eye out for that. Definitely a little bit of a bias pick, Kurt, but that's where I'm going to go with it. I think if you don't know the name Dalton Connect out there, look it up and get used to it, because I think he's going to be the next big thing. But other closing remarks.
I'd say Holland, just to answer your question too, Kurt. I'd say Holland, if he gets in the right team. Holland is a guy that can go one way or the other. He's a great scorer, but I don't know what he's very hard for me to pin down. But if he gets in the right team with a good foundation and allows him a chance to flourish as a player, I think he can maybe be one of the best, if not the best player in this draft. But that's not saying much in such a star bereft draft that looks like we may have.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the lesser drafts we've had in recent memory. I think. I just don't think there's anyone that really stands out as much, but you never know. We could get surprised by it. I'm trying to think. Other final thoughts. I really, I'm just looking forward to seeing, some of these teams that need to take the next step with filling the roles they need with certain players, like we talked about, and it'll be interesting. And of course, we got the NBA Finals still. We kind of skipped over that a little, but we got the NBA Finals coming up. I know you guys really, 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 really do not want Boston to win it all. I also think it's kind of boring. I'm gonna be honest, that all the teams that could have won it, but we'll have to see. It should be a good series. I do think. I do think they'll put on a show, Luka and Tatum, and it'll be something cool. We have a little changing of the guard happening in the NBA with the players who are starting to take over the league. So that's my closing remarks. Kurt, Connect on a overrated list. Says who? I don't think he's that overrated. I think it's a little bit about his weight. I do think he's a little thin for his frame, maybe. That might be why. But again, he had plenty of 30, 40-point games in college to where I'm like, he could score in the NBA with these, but we'll have to wait and see. So that's why I had him underrated, because people had him overrated. So maybe it's the reverse psychology to it.
You never know, but we'll see. Once again, it is Alfred Ezman. Please stop by Alfred Ezman on Twitter or OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Alfred, please stop by as soon as you can to give us the update on what your thoughts are on the NBA. We've got around the corner the NBA Finals. We've got free agency. We've got the draft. June is still looking really good for us, and it's on the way. And hopefully you'll be a part of it, my friend, right here at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast.